Welcome back to another episode of Stand on Guard. I'm your host, David Krayden. The Online Harms Act. You heard about it? Well, I've got some bad news for you. It is aimed at your free speech. We'll be back in a moment.
So we are in a very precarious position in this country. We need political change, but we also need the resolve to resist.
Yes, as my dear departed cat Sasha used to always indicate, please ring that bell. Ring it early in the broadcast so we can beat Trudeau's censorship that's now more necessary than ever. And we also need to beat that YouTube algorithm. We need to continue to expand the audience, more people to see these videos. So please like the broadcast, subscribe, become a member. And if you've already subscribed, you may have been unsubscribed. YouTube is up to some very bad shenanigans right now. So thank you for your support, regardless. We're talking about the Online Harms Act. You know, I've been talking about this kind of legislation now for over a year. I kept thinking it was going to be called the Online Safety Act. And it was going to be about misinformation, disinformation, and malinformation. Well, the Liberals are throwing us a curveball. Yesterday, at a news conference, Attorney General and Justice Minister Arif Virani, a guy you probably don't know very well. He was almost a non-entity when he was shuffled into the federal cabinet last summer and replaced David Lametti, the notorious David Lametti, who wanted to bring tanks in against the Freedom Convoy and was just so wholeheartedly in favor of the invocation of the Emergencies Act. Well, Virani's been given sole custody of this Online Harms Act file, Bill C-63. It's his baby. It's been taken out of the purview of Heritage Canada and given entirely to the Justice Department. Why? Because this is all about changing the law, making new laws, and endangering free speech. This is the third part of Justin Trudeau's censorship legislation. It started with Bill C-11, which was supposedly about forcing social media to have more Canadian content. How ridiculous. There's so much Canadian content on there. But it was once again aimed at restricting content on social media. Then came C-18, the Online Streaming Act, which was all about supposedly making big social media companies pay to put Canadian news on their platforms. This was nothing short of extortion, because if you're a Canadian media writer, you want your material to be on social media so you can get more clicks, make more money, get more exposure. That's how it works in reality. Justin Trudeau doesn't understand reality, though. So that was the second part. That was C-18. Here comes C-63, the Online Harms Act. And you know what? It's all about protecting children. Who wouldn't be against that? It's all about opposing hate speech. Who would want to support hate speech? And it's all about clamping down on child pornography. Of course, everybody wants to do that. Let's listen to the minister talk about this bill and how he cloaks it in the new terminology. And then we'll discuss what the bill really contains and what's in it that's harmful for your free speech and mine, because there's plenty of that.
Well, actually, this is really critically important legislation. It's a first of its kind in Canada, one of the first of its kind really in the world. And what I would say is that it was critical that we got it right and got the balance right. And in the intervening period, since the mandate letter first appeared with this kind of directive to pass this legislation, what we've done is consulted. We consulted widely with Canadians, with experts. We consulted internationally. We looked at what other allies, Western allies, were doing with legislation of this kind, what worked and what didn't work. We believe we found the right balance. That is a balance that is very protective of the free expression of people in a democracy, as we always need to be, but that is also a balance that protects kids fundamentally, protects vulnerable communities, and ensures that we are empowering people in terms of their interactions online and with the internet.
Was that primarily the challenge that you sought to address? Essentially, the main critique of the first iteration of this bill was that it went too far and would limit free speech. Was your objective not to do that here?
Our objective is always to empower people's expression, particularly with respect to political speech. My job as Minister of Justice is to defend people's charter rights. That is entrenched in Section 2 of the Charter. I will always do that. But I think the careful balance is that political speech is at the height of what is protected in Canada, and I will always do that. Violence and violent speech is not. And what we're seeing in Canada and around the world, frankly, is violence perpetrated against children in particular. This bill takes a very strong step in that regard. What I would say to you, Vashti, is that you know that there are 7 different types of harmful content that we are targeting here. In 2 of those instances, we have said that there's no place for that content in the public discourse on the internet. That is material that sexually exploits a child, the type of child pornography that you heard at that press conference, you heard Jane speak about in terms of her own child. And secondly, content that involves the sharing of an intimate image against someone's consent, what is actually known as revenge porn. It exists in this country, it exists around the planet. We are taking active steps to ensure that material is taken down and taken down quickly. With respect to the other categories, what we are advocating for and we want to work with the platforms on is a safety plan that helps them to mitigate the risk of the other harmful content that we have identified, and that they would put in place a safety plan. They would explain what measures they're taking to reduce risk, and they would be held accountable for how well their plan is working. That's the nature of what the consultation was about. That is the pivot that we made. It's an important pivot because Canadians should understand we take this seriously. I take this seriously. We're trying to get the balance right, and I believe we've done so.
So what this is about is self-censorship. That's what's scary about this bill. That's what's most scary about this bill. They won't come against you right away and throw you in jail. First, they'll say, hey, you broke the rules. You did something that's against our narrative. You opposed our talking points. Change your speech. Correct yourself. Get with the program. Abide by our analysis. This is the self-censorship that exists in every totalitarian regime, that existed in Soviet Russia and Nazi Germany, where people had to tell themselves, I can't say that because the government will get me for it. I can't write that because there'll be repercussions. I can't communicate that because there's going to be consequences, legal, political, or otherwise. So the only time I'm really safe is in my bed at midnight when nobody's listening. And that's what Justin Trudeau is doing here. That's the essence of Bill C-63. It's self-censorship, and if you don't correct yourself, then there's going to be consequences. Then the government will come down on you hard. And that's what this bill is all about. Don't be fooled into thinking it's about protecting children. It's about protecting Justin Trudeau. It's about protecting the narrative they want you to listen to. Let's look at some of the specifics of this bill here. Okay, what are the categories of harmful content? There's 7 categories. Yeah, they start off with the bit about protecting children. Everybody believes in that. How about content that foments hatred? Now, this bill will also insist that a definition of hatred be inserted into the Criminal Code of Canada. Now, how are they going to do that? How broad will that definition be? How applicable will that definition be to anything Justin Trudeau doesn't agree with? Pierre Poilievre, leader of the Conservative Party of Canada, has often said that in Canada, hate speech is anything Justin Trudeau hates. So it could be that broad. That's also content that incites violent extremism or terrorism. What did the Trudeau government consider to be violent extremism? The Freedom Convoy. They thought it was a violent extremist organization. In fact, they even spread the lie that it had a militia, that it was based in some sort of white nationalism or white supremacy or even Nazism. That's the lie they spread, and so they invoked the Emergencies Act against it. So if I have content that promotes or supports the Freedom Convoy or other peaceful protests that the Liberal government wants to clamp down on, that could be content that is judged to be harmful. Better censor yourself, David. Better shut up, David. Or how about content that incites violence? Well, once again, very broad application. And this is why this is extremely dangerous. Now let's look at what else the Online Harms Act does. It's going to create something. I hope you can read this here. But it's going to create a Digital Safety Commission of Canada. You say, what the hell is that? Another government department or agency from a Trudeau government that has radically and drastically increased the size of the public service already? We need another branch of bureaucracy to monitor our free speech, to monitor the internet. Yes, and it says, what is this Digital Safety Commission going to do? It's going to enforce legislation and regulatory obligations and hold online services accountable for their responsibilities through auditing for compliance. Compliance, yes, yes. Issuing compliance orders and penalizing services that fail to comply. What does penalizing mean? Sorry, you're not defining that. You're not suggesting what that means. Is that a fine? Is that jail time? Is that loss of free speech? Is that loss of your media organization? Could be any or all of those things. And who's going to be in charge of this thing? Yes, they're going to have an internet censor, an online censorship czar. And in typical parlance of the Trudeau government, it's going to be called a Digital Safety Ombudsperson of Canada. Sounds pretty nefarious to me. So really, that's what this legislation is all about. So don't be fooled. Justin Trudeau has been talking about misinformation and disinformation now for the last year. We were expecting this bill to appear as the Online Safety Act. Guess what, folks? We were too successful in warning people that it was coming. I'm not saying just me. I think I did a lot of work in that category. Others did too. Warning Canadians that this censorship bill was coming. The third part of Trudeau's censorship trilogy was coming, and it was going to be worse than the other two elements of that trilogy. And it was introduced in the House of Commons yesterday, on Monday. And this is why I'm putting a broadcast out this morning, because we need to fight this. We need to fight this because, God help us, the Liberals bought off the NDP again. The NDP are in the Liberals' pockets. They're in Justin Trudeau's pocket because he bought them off with more concessions. And the NDP are good to go to continue propping up this Trudeau government. And they will support this bill. The NDP is a party that is pro-censorship and wants your free speech to stop. So clearly they will support this legislation. I don't know if we have enough time before the arrival of a new government, most probably one led by Pierre Poilievre. I'll be watching Question Period very closely today, and I will be back live at 2 o'clock to discuss this bill again. If there's been any new information out there, but I want to hear what Pierre Poilievre is doing about this. I want to know that he's continuing to say that hate speech in Canada is anything that Justin Trudeau hates, because that's what is at stake here. I want the Conservative Party to actively oppose this, to keep this bill from passing before the next election in about a year and a few months. We may have time, we may not. We cannot rely on the new Democratic Party to do the right thing, to stand up for free speech, because they won't. They failed us at every opportunity. They have failed us in standing up for free speech and basic fundamental rights. They are all about the state encroaching upon your freedom. So I'm not optimistic, but I'm going to continue fighting this bill because we need to stop giving in to authoritarian measures in this country. We've mentioned it before. Victor Laszlo, the character from Casablanca, he's asked, why do you keep fighting? He says, you might as well ask me why we keep breathing. If we stop breathing, we die. If we stop fighting, the world will die. And that's my message today. We need to keep fighting this legislation and this bill. Don't be fooled by all the talk about child exploitation and protecting children, by the nonsense that is surrounding this being about protecting your rights, when in fact it's about taking those rights away. Yes, the Attorney General had a very effective news conference, very good distraction from really what you're trying to do here. Don't tell me you're interested in protecting my free speech or my political rights when you're not. You want me to self-censor, and if I don't, the penalties will be on their way, thanks to the online censorship czar, who is in the office for 5 years and appointed by the prime minister, like everything else in this country. One man appoints them all, and he's not subject to any judicial review, any kind of parliamentary review. He just gets the job. So this is a challenge, as Justin Trudeau loves to talk about, a challenge. But we're going to keep fighting. We're not going to give in to this. The Online Harms Act is everything that we warned about with the Online Safety Act. They've just changed the vocabulary. They've changed the emphasis. And like Europe, the European Union passed an anti-free speech bill recently. This is all about hate speech. And anything the government doesn't like can be constituted as hate speech. Will I be allowed to criticize gender ideology in the schools? Or will that be called hatred? Will I be allowed to criticize any government policy if they can say I'm fomenting hatred, inciting hatred against anybody by saying so? That's what's at stake here, and that's what we have to keep fighting. So I'll have more on this when I come back live at 2 o'clock this afternoon. Thanks for watching. Please listen to this brief message. God bless you all. Thank you for watching this episode of Stand on Guard and being a part of the Krayden'S Right channel. If you've watched this episode to this point, you've watched it all. And that's really important for a small station like this. We always say subscribe, hit the bell, be a part of the Krayden resistance. Resolve to resist. That's what we're doing. And if you become a subscriber, if you're a supporter of this station or a member through Substack, through YouTube, and now you can be a local as well, that's so important to us because I couldn't do this without you. I made a decision to become an independent journalist about a year ago because I wanted to bring all of my experience in the military, in journalism, to you. I don't promise anything I can't deliver. I don't offer clickbait. I offer truth. The truth is out there, and it's my job to bring that truth to light and to you. Thanks for being a part of the Krayden'S Right resistance, and we'll see you.